Welcome to Season 2 of the Spotlight series. Don't just survive, thrive. Most of us have experienced challenging times in our lives, particularly over the last few months of 2020. The key is how we choose to respond, whether we merely survive or thrive. My name is Nicola Steele, founder of JJP Talent Solutions, an Australian IT recruitment company. With over 20 years' expertise, I provide insights on how you can transform your career to the next level. The focus of Season 2 is around reinvention and how we can thrive in the new normal. In this podcast, I speak to experts from a variety of professions, including HR, technology, marketing, and business coaching. I don't have all the answers. However, collectively, we can instill hope, clarity, and inspiration. I hope you enjoy listening. I'm delighted to introduce Chloe Rees. Chloe is a program manager, change wizard, and innovator. Today, we're going to talk about the impact of change during the pandemic and her predictions for the future. Chloe, thank you for joining me on Season 2, Episode 8 of the Spotlight series, Don't Just Survive, Thrive.
Thank you so much for inviting me along to participate.
Thank you, Chloe. So, Chloe, tell me more about you and your background and what you do.
So my background is I started my career in HR about 15 years ago as a HR generalist, focusing on case management, recruitment and training, and a bit of return to work as well, so a bit of that rehabilitation activity. Relocated to London for 2 years in 2010, and I worked for a train leasing company as a HR project manager. So I was lucky enough to do some work in Luxembourg and Germany for one of their projects, which was pretty exciting. And I got to obviously deliver a program of work for non-English speaking backgrounds, which was something that really helped me improve my stakeholder engagement skills. More recently, so about 6 years ago, I actually transitioned into the technology field, and I was doing a bit of consulting work for about 2 years. And then I landed a permanent role with PowerLink Queensland, who's my current employer. So I initially was engaged to work on the corporate IT side, which is looking after all of your corporate apps, so your Microsoft Office and anything that runs off the corporate network. And more recently, so earlier this year, I was lucky enough to snag a position in the Next Generation Network Operations program of works. And I'm acting as a senior project manager for 3 transformation projects within that program. My main focus in the program is stakeholder engagement, change management, and delivering a positive outcome for PowerLink. One of the big pieces of work that I'm working on at the moment is actually a transformation for one of the key critical business areas within PowerLink. So that's focusing on your human factor design, situational awareness, technology, business processes, and also a bit of construction, so building, which is completely different to my normal background. So it's been a big learning curve. So PowerLink, like most organisations, is going through a huge technology transformation, and I'm pretty excited to be a part of the team that's leading and driving the change across the organisation. What I'm passionate about is obviously people and change management and project and program delivery across your digitalisation and transformation processes. And I'm actually, as you mentioned, a self-proclaimed change wizard. I see my skills in change management as what I consider my wizardry, and it's a skill that I consider myself pretty good at, and that I'd be a leader in that field as well.
Fantastic. So over the last few months, you're going to have seen a lot of change and in how we work, how we school, how we socialise. And as a change wizard, you're probably not resistant to change, but a lot of people are. So how do you think generally people's attitude to change will change in the future? There's a lot of change in that sentence.
There is a lot of change.
And how do you think people's attitude and appetite for change is going to adapt as it's been forced upon us over the last few months?
I think majority of people will not be so adverse to change in the future, and they will probably come on board a lot quicker with big changes because of COVID and the changes that happen within the work environment and within people's personal lives as well. There are some people, though, that do not like change and will never like it. So I guess you can't factor those people out. So they've always got to be the group that you mainly focus on and support them through. I think one of the biggest things that I see as a concern for the change that people have gone through will be transitioning back to work, and obviously impacts to an individual who may potentially be forced to come back to work when they've just had, say, 3 to 6 months of working from home, and obviously demonstrating that they can actually deliver their outputs from a working from home scenario. What I see as something that will help in the future is leadership coming on board and understanding each individual employee's needs and obviously how they work from that working from home environment, and kind of combining those two together and working out whether someone actually doesn't need to be in the office anymore, or if, you know, they could do 50-50 or something like that. A gentleman who I was talking to the other day, who I work closely with, mentioned that he actually didn't like the working from home situation. And his reasoning was that his clients need him to be on site to support them through their activities. And having him in the room or visible was obviously a better engagement, and they would get it. They felt like they were getting a better output. So I think it's all around that, not just you as an individual employee, but how you fit into your organisation and your team as well. So what are your outputs? What are you trying to deliver? And then I guess that's probably the decision point of whether you continue working from home or if you come back into work.
And not one size fits all, basically. So
Definitely
having that
not.
Consulting with everybody that's involved in there. But I think as well, it has, a lot of companies have been very resistant to people working from home or remotely or flexibly. But this, dare I say it, experiment that being forced upon us has given the opportunity to see that it can work, or in fact that you don't actually like it.
Yeah, very true. It is like that forced experiment, like you've rightly said. There was no option. It was you jump in and sink or swim. So I think most organisations have done pretty well to not sink, but obviously there are some that will slip back into their old ways, which will be disappointing. So it's up to leadership to kind of drive that flexibility across the work practices.
And there's not been one person that hasn't been affected by this pretty much on a global scale. So for you personally, Chloe, what have been the biggest benefits and the biggest challenges over the changes for you over the last few months?
Well, I think some of the biggest benefits are probably the commute to work. So my commute isn't even that big. It's probably about 30 minutes each way, but it's all that preparing yourself to actually get into work that adds on to your commute. So it's not just getting in the car and driving, it's actually getting yourself ready for work, getting your lunches ready, preparing yourself, getting dressed and heading out. So about an hour and a half to 2 hours a day was being saved, obviously, from that commute, which was amazing to just be at home earlier, being able to cook dinner, all those kinds of things, spending time with your family as well, which links into work-life balance, which I seen was a huge benefit of improving while I was working from home. There is the productivity increase, which I've heard a lot and read a lot more recently, that productivity levels have risen. But on the other hand, it's that longer work hours. So are people more productive because they're working longer hours, or are they more productive because, in fact, they aren't getting interrupted? It's that kind of double-edged sword. You're a lot more productive, but are you working 10 hours now instead of an 8-hour day? I think one of the biggest challenges was obviously companies being more digitally ready to be able to support work from home across their organisation. But then a benefit was the trust within the IT departments of companies, and them being able to quickly get their organisations ready to work from home, which is kind of like a forced digital transformation in a way, which is now probably going to change the way businesses run their digital program of work into the future, because they know what they can do in a short period of time. and they kind of understand the impacts and the risks as well. So it kind of opens up a new door.
Yeah. And it's interesting, actually, my sister lives in London and works for a major bank there. And they, of course, had to work from home, but it was extremely difficult because of the security and the legacy IT and everything for them to
Yes.
do that. So their working from home policy almost didn't really make sense because they had to they had to go backwards and forwards back into London and out of London on an almost timeshare basis. But in terms of digital transformation, what other impacts have you seen during, and we're not post-COVID, unfortunately, but during COVID-19?
I'd probably say some of the biggest impacts I noted when we first all started working from home in Australia was the bandwidth speed of the internet. So internet providers actually across the board had to kind of increase that speed for those working from home. So I thought that was very interesting, and the government obviously weighing into that as well. Something that I saw, I guess it's probably not so much an impact, but I'd probably say, linking back to your previous question, a bit of a benefit was people accepting technology changes in beta mode. So that rapid learning and experimentation piece is huge. And that will obviously impact the way we do digital projects into the future for a lot of organisations. So it won't be reliant on that 100% perfect rollout. What I'm hoping is it will actually reduce it down to, your 70 to 75% okay to go. And then you do your remaining 25 to 30% of changes. As you've kind of got it in production, you know how you're using the system, you know what works, what doesn't work. So I think that's going to be a huge impact to, obviously, your project delivery.
And you can get some really good user feedback because they're not just a sample of users, they are all the users.
Yeah, correct. And I think as well, it kind of opens up the transition between your project and your BAU, but what support a project would carry through and for how long post that go live date. So as a project kind of wraps up, should they be staying on for that extra 1 to 2 months to kind of cycle through that remaining percent so that they can help the business continue to improve the solution, and then they finish up when they get, say, 99% or something like that. Yeah, I did see, I was doing some reading recently with Deloitte, and they actually reported that some of the big impacts for digital are smartphone releases. So we won't see a lot of frequent smartphone releases this year. And that's just due to factories being closed down. But with them trying to open back up again, there's still that supply chain issue, which is going on. Your cloud providers are receiving more business, and obviously the impacts to security and the security posture of those platforms. So the cloud vendors are getting more requests, but can they sustain from a security standpoint the amount of users that will be accessing their particular solution? And then obviously just something that's ongoing, that's not just from COVID, but I think that will increase because of COVID, is that robotic process automation, or RPA, then your artificial intelligence and your machine learning. So that's been around for years. But I think as we're getting, because of the COVID situation, I think that organisations will be more inclined to test and implement these kind of systems to support them into the future.
Excellent. So in terms of examples of successful digital innovations, what have you really seen happening? What examples could you give?
So I think one of the biggest ones is online learning platforms for schools for when they were obviously in lockdown. So the education department, how quickly they were able to set up their learning at home resources, which are available online. So that was huge, calling out things like English, math, science, and reading to help parents who had their kids at home with them, but also the video link technologies that the schools were using to still run their classes with their kids. For if it was 3 or 4 hours a day, it was still, kids were still online accessing their teachers and having fun with their friends at school. So that was huge, I think, that's come out of COVID. And then I noticed things like applications like House Party, Zoom, or Microsoft Teams, obviously booming because everybody was still trying to contact each other. They wanted that face-to-face interaction, and they still wanted to kind of build those relationships and have those discussions with friends. which I think is awesome for into the future, because now you can pretty much contact anyone in the world at any time and have a face-to-face discussion, and it's more normal now. Also, things like your collaboration tools. So we've been running a lot of workshops within the team I'm working now. And one thing that was rather difficult was, how do you collaborate throughout your workshops? So we started using things like Mural or Teams whiteboarding, which made, your simple whiteboarding tasks and sharing of information or collaborating on a particular idea a lot easier than just talking with each other. So I think those things have been great. I've seen a few conferences were delivered by video and not in person, which I thought was really interesting. And obviously still getting their message across and being able to have interactive sessions with their attendees and their audiences, which I think is great. And there was one that I recently saw, so it's not finished yet, but I believe it's been an outcome from COVID. So the Australian Digital Health Agency is actually moving towards a fully electric and mobile script situation. So they'll no longer be your paper-based scripting when you go see your GP. This is huge because doctors and GPs have always had their paper scripts. So now everything will go online and it will become an integrated system. So not just the system itself will be huge, the security posture around it will have to be also huge, which is like a massive piece of work for that organisation.
Which is, that's fantastic. In fact, with telehealth, getting repeat prescriptions, you didn't have to go to the doctors, you could just go to the pharmacy where the script already was. I know I had to do that for my daughter. And also the conferences you mentioned, and when you used to go to events and you'd be milling around, I'd generally be milling around the food section before the presentation. Yes. But I found face-to-face, you'd have quite fleeting conversations. Whereas when you were actually in the Zoom rooms, for example, and you were broken up into groups of 4 or 6, you did actually have more meaningful conversations that then continued later on and seemed to almost be more natural, rather than that when you've not met somebody and giving your business card or, hey, let's link in.
It took away those awkward meetings.
Yeah, exactly, because you were all in it together and you couldn't just hide behind the sausage rolls or whatever. You did have to talk, and I thought that was really good. Although that said, I remember at the beginning, house party and all that kind of thing was all very, very exciting, and having all these parties. But then actually it became a bit draining and we lost interest.
Yes. I must admit that's exactly the same with myself and my friend group. It was all the rage, and then it was just too much, and then it was kind of finished.
Yeah, and it was friends that we'd normally see get together in person. The normal FaceTime, Skype, etc. I'd do with family back in the UK or overseas was happening anyway at a designated hour. And I also thought with school, I remember the first week or so, it was a bit sticky, but then the teachers, oh my goodness, they really did such an incredible job, and the students as well, because I think it was difficult for them.
Yeah, definitely agree. The teachers have done an amazing job.
Definitely. And so in terms of, again, coming back to change, because you are the change wizard, what changes would you like to see happen to make organisations more flexible and more nimble?
I think a big change that a lot of organisations need to consider is agility within their business model. So not being stuck to a set 5-year plan. You can have your 5-year business model, but you want to be able to be flexible and adaptable so that you can, when situations like COVID happen, you can shift your focus. So an example of that is there's a distillery called Detmold Group in South Australia, and they are actually known for producing paper and board-based sustainable products. And they actually swapped into hand sanitizers and making hand sanitizers. So they saw an opportunity to pretty much move completely in the opposite direction of their standard business model because of COVID, so that they could still keep their workforce employed. So I think it's things like that, being able to see an opportunity. Yes, it is terrifying, but pulling your resources together and coming up with a new approach or a new temporary business model. It could be a business model for long term as well. Definitely encouraging more innovative thinking. So you want to solve your current problem with the new direction. And I guess with the business changing and the organizations trying to stay relevant, you want to make sure that people are able to make those innovative design decisions so they don't feel like they're locked down or not able, or their feedback not taken on board. So I think there's a lot of intelligent people within organizations who have very good ideas, but are probably a little bit too scared to bring them up. So having that opportunity to be able to do that. Obviously, leaders embracing that new norm. So we've had 3 to 6 months, I say 3 to 6 because some places went into lockdown a lot earlier than Queensland, of working from home and being able to be productive, demonstrating that we can work from home. So it's about leaders embracing that into the future, continuing with being flexible and adaptable to the situations that come up down the track. So when COVID's old news and something else happens, being comfortable with the employees, obviously still working from home, to be able to support them. Something that will impact the transition that will be massive is leaders not supporting their employees and just automatically going back to the way it used to be, because maybe that's their comfortable area, and not being open to discussion or open to working together with your employee. So I think that will be huge and something that will help businesses be flexible and nimble.
So I think as well, you mentioned about employees being listened to, and talks about collaboration tools and using more collaboration tools. And I think maybe people who are frightened about speaking out in public but have brilliant ideas might use Slack or Teams to make those contributions, and I guess we'll have more diversity of thought as well.
I definitely agree with you on that. I think it's been a great opportunity for extroverts to see how introverts work, which is something I've learned myself. So I'm quite extroverted. And obviously when lockdown happened, working from home, limited contact with people, using these online tools was my only way to interact. So it was nice to see introverts coming out of their shell and interacting a lot more frequently and a lot more freely with their information sharing across workshops and things like that.
Definitely. So overall, Chloe, what would your predictions be for the future of work in 5-10 years' time?
My predictions are going to be that we will move away from the strict 9-to-5 workday. It will focus on output and performance delivery over working a 5-day, 8-hour day for week. We will be able to work anywhere in the world from the comfort of our homes, and we will be able to have interactions on the global scale. So it'll be a lot more involvement across different user groups into particular ideas for some companies. I think that full-time parents won't struggle as much to find part-time jobs. They will probably be able to work full-time, but it will just be obviously outside of that 9-to-5 standard workday. It'll be across a 7-day roster that is basically, this is what we're expecting your output to look like, and this is your timeline of delivery. And then allowing that person to be able to work flexibly and get their task completed as to the timeline. So I think it'll change the way that we're, interacting and doing business completely.
Absolutely. And interestingly, I'm a parent and have my own business, so I work full time, but I tend to work 7 days a week, but less hours each day.
Yeah.
So that I'm being a parent and I'm running a business. The only issue I can see with that, and I have to be careful myself, is not working too much,
Yes.
and then suffering burnout, and not even burnout. You just become a bit stale in the way that you think because you're always working, you're always at your desk. But I think those are some really great predictions, and it will be really, really interesting to see what happens in 2025. When my firstborn child should be in the workplace by then, and 2030 when my secondborn child will be as well. We'll see what happens. So thank you very much for sharing your insights, Chloe. Is there anything else that you'd like to share at all?
So I guess the one thing I'd like to share from a change management standpoint and adversity towards change is if we consider that not that long ago, we all had Nokia 3315s, we all watched VHS, our internet was ADSL dial up, and now that we're in 2020, we all use smartphones, even my grandparents. Barely anyone has a landline, most people have a mobile. We can access NBN or the Wi Fi from anywhere in the world. We stream Netflix over VHS. And I mean, some of us completely skipped the DVD and Blu ray, needing to reset our whole video collection. And as society, we adapted to these changes because we had to, and we did it with reasonable ease. So, I mean, not everybody, as I said, was comfortable with the changes. People did buy a whole new video set of Blu ray and DVDs, and now it's on Netflix. But if we can do that, why can't we use these techniques to deal with changes that happen within our work environment, to let them happen with a bit more ease and obviously be a bit more welcoming and flexible towards them, because it's not something that we haven't dealt with before.
Absolutely. And I'm smiling because I remember my father in the 80s when it was choosing your video, and he spent so much time researching it. Do you know what he went with?
What?
Betamax. I don't even know if you know what Betamax is.
No, I definitely don't.
Well, it was between Betamax and VHS, and VHS won the war, but unfortunately my father had bought a Betamax video player.
Oh, no.
And then he's had to change to VHS and then Blu-ray, and now he's on Netflix.
Yes, and it's that situation of we stood in Blockbuster for hours trying to work out what movie to choose, and now we sit on our couch and flick through the hundreds of movies that Netflix offers and still spend the same time trying to work out what we want to watch.
Absolutely. But it is fantastic how much it has changed. And when you look at your mobile phone, how much it can actually do, and how 30 years ago you had probably a whole room full of equipment to do the same thing as your mobile phone can do.
Yes, correct.
Well, thank you very much, Chloe. It's a delight to speak to you. Thank you.
And thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review. If you're looking for career advice, your next career opportunity, or to grow your tech team, then please call me, Nicola Steele, on 0499 773 546, or go to our website, jjptalent.com.au. The Don't Just Survive, Thrive podcast is part of the Spotlight series, which includes the YouTube channel Spotlight on Software Development. If you want more insights into the software industry, particularly tech startups, then subscribe to the Spotlight on Software Development YouTube channel. Thank you for listening. Until next time.